Still do. Call the fax line.
Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. It's Conservative Cat. And you can always catch this show Saturdays from 5 to 7. And you can catch it on the live stream. We're on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, Twitter, the works. And with me in studio, we have Chuck Erickson. He's a McLean County Board member, possibly an Illinois State rep. We'll see. And
Yes, I'd be happy to talk about that.
I know, we're jumping it.
All right, well, jump ahead. All right.
When we came on his studio, you guys were like, "What? Well, why are they laughing?" Because Kevin, being as bright as he is, put the phone right next to the microphone, and it caused this screeching, this and then Chuck over here dated himself, and he says, "It sounds like when I call the fax machine."
What's one of those, Chuck?
Yeah, I know. What's a fax machine?
What's a fax machine? Well, at least he's not as old as Mitch McConnell. Ooh.
No, I'm not. Where am I?
No.
You okay? You need to go back to your office, Chuck?
I probably do, yes. Call the fax line again.
The voice you're hearing over there is Kevin Phares. We like to have fun here on Conservative Cat, but we've got some serious business to cover. Chuck Erickson, are you running for Illinois State Representative in the 88th House District? And
I have an exploratory committee working on that right now. I'm leaning very heavily towards running. I want to get the advice and my exploratory committee. We want to make sure that we're going to be competitive in this race. We think we can be. The race, the district is 50% McLean County, but the other part is 50% Macon, DeWitt, and Piatt County. I have a lot of support in McLean County. And so, from Matt Lane to former Sheriff John Sandage, Law and Order is going to back me. Conservatives are going to back me. The people who know me know of my conservative record, and very interested in running. I have an unmatched record of conservative leadership and public service that no one else in the 88th that is presently asserting to run has.
Regan Deering.
Yes.
Regan Deering. Now, who's on this exploratory committee?
Well, David Paul Blumenshine has been helping. Bill Brady's been helping. Matt Lane's been helping.
Still got to get the okay from your wife, Chuck. Is that the other one?
I've got to get the okay from Shakira, my dog. It's going to take a lot of time away from my dog. Okay. So, and she's an older dog and she needs to be taken care of.
She's a cutie pie. And he has a framed photo of her. And I love that.
Yeah, she's the best dog ever.
She is. She's adorable. So this exploratory committee, just a bunch of Republicans here in the community, correct?
Yeah, people that could give money to my campaign, but also people that could volunteer to help out. I'm working on that right now. Excited about the possibility of running and matching my record up against hers, which I think I have a better record. A lot of people can talk as a conservative, but I have 12 years voting record of voting as a conservative on the McLean County Board. And I'm proud of that record. I've never voted for a tax increase. I voted against the vaccine mandate. I tried to open up McLean County when we had the COVID issues. I was the leader on that. There was nobody else doing it. I led on that, trying to get McLean County to get open. I have a great record of trying to help constituents. And I'll just give a few examples if I can. Guy was trying to get a boat repair facility out in McLean County, and he had petitioned for a full zoning change and he couldn't get it. And so what I did was, after that meeting, I went up to his attorney and I said, "You're not pursuing this right. We need to do this differently." So I got him in touch with the assistant civil state's attorney. They had to bring it back through the process. Eventually we got that. It's those types of things that I enjoy doing, is helping small businessmen get their businesses off, trying to navigate through the bureaucracy to get anything done. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing we did on that. Another example would be, ag tourism. Lo and behold, what you would not believe is that the land use committee on the McLean County Board did not have the authority to propose amendments to the ordinances. The elected officials didn't. The
Mhm.
zoning board of appeals did, and they're unelected. We didn't have that authority.
What?
Yeah, this is how government
Well,
works.
it's the same tale. It's the tale as old as time, right? You have these bureaucrats, you
They
have the
always
people
think
on
they-
this committee who think that they have the representative power.
Right. Well, long story short, I mean, I'm not going to bore anybody with the details, but got an ordinance passed that said the land use committee could propose an ordinance. Ultimately, then we proposed an ordinance for a text amendment for ag tourism. And so a lady was able to open up a barn and, and have people come out there. And that's something else I've done. Those things are important to me because when you go down to Springfield, you are going to be in a minority. Hopefully not a super minority forever, but you are going to be in a minority, and there are small businessmen that are still going to need help. I've got a record of helping them get through the bureaucracy to try to get things done. And
So
that's something I want to do.
You have this record. Why not come out and announce officially?
Because the other individual has the support of a lot of people in Macon County. Okay. And I want to make sure that I'll have support in DeWitt, Pyatt, some in Macon, and a lot in McLean. I want to make sure that I can raise money because she has lots of money. And
$50,000.
Well, she has more than that.
Who's funding her?
She can fund herself.
Gotcha.
And so
like a true Democrat, right? Well, not really.
Well, listen, I've met her. She's a nice person. I'm not going to say anything bad about her. Okay. But to me, this should be an election and a choice, not a coronation.
Absolutely. Well, one question I have though, Chuck, is like, so obviously you want to get support from those other counties and everything.
I'm going to have to, yeah.
But I mean, thinking about the numbers, and I haven't looked at them exactly, but couldn't you essentially, based on the amount of people in each of those counties, couldn't you essentially win this election with pretty much McLean County and almost nothing from the rest of them?
You could come very close to winning it with just McLean County, but
obviously, again, you would want constituency from your entire district.
But if you want to represent the rural communities,
the political versus the personal.
Yeah, you want to be there for Monticello. You want to be there for Farmer City. You want to be there for Forsyth. Okay, just as much as you want to be there for Hayworth and Leroy. Okay, this isn't regional. But yeah, the issue is I would have better name recognition in McLean County. I'm going to have that. I'm going to have a lot of support. She's going to have a lot of support down in Macon County, but I'm certainly willing to put my conservative record, which is an actual record. It's not just talk. Ross Webb and I always say, look at what they do, not what they say. And if you look at what I've done, I've always been a conservative. When I was chairman of the McLean County Republican Party, I was a conservative. When I voted on the McLean County Board, I've been a conservative. I've even had liberal reporters call me one of the more conservative members of the McLean County Board.
I remember that. Okay? I remember that. One of the more conservative.
So, people see it in my voting record. It's not something I make up.
Right.
It's just known on the county board that I'm one of the conservatives on there.
Yeah, right. Now, people you surround yourself around, like a Bill Brady type, maybe not so as conservative as perhaps you are. He has a record.
Yeah, let's talk about that. When you're an attorney in Bloomington Normal, you get to meet a lot of people. Okay. And not every person that walks in your door shares your political beliefs 100%. Okay. But you don't turn them away. They still have legal rights and they still have rights that need to be stood up for.
And you still need a paycheck. So.
Yeah. Well, but more importantly than that, I've known Bill Brady for a long time. I've known David Paul Blumenshine for a long time. Okay. I consider myself friends with both. Okay. If you asked either one of them, do they agree with me on every single thing I've ever said? They'd probably tell you no. but I've had to do business with him. I'm a real estate attorney. David Paul Blumenschein is a realtor.
Mhm.
I knew David Paul Blumenschein before he was even in politics. Okay. And before he ever got involved. Okay. I knew his father. I knew everybody in his family. So, I've always worked with them, and I've always worked, I actually, rent space right now in my office from Bill Brady. Okay. So, I mean, you can't stop those connections. People in town, and you do work for them. I've done some work for some very conservative Republicans. Okay.
Mhm.
And I've done some work. If someone comes in and wants a will, I don't say, okay, are you a Republican or a Democrat? Okay. Because if
See,
I
this would be
can't,
the difference between you and us.
I mean,
If I was an attorney, I'd be like, okay, you vote for Donald?
and as much
This
as
is why
I'm
you're not an attorney.
as much as I'm a conservative, I mean, I'm not going to sit there and say
Yeah.
Democrats still have legal rights, because that's a principle conservatives believe in.
Mhm.
Everybody has legal rights. Okay. We just want the justice system to treat us all fairly.
Mhm.
I mean, is that too much to ask?
Apparently it is, Chuck.
I
Apparently it
mean,
is.
but we just want the justice system to treat us all fairly.
Yeah. Going into the Illinois state representative spot, right? If you were to be the Illinois state representative, I think the concern, right, that is with every Republican, and it's just the state of Illinois, okay, where you get somebody in there and then all of a sudden they turn around and they start voting for things like, oh, I don't know, non-citizens having the right to arrest citizens.
Well, I wouldn't have voted for that, but yeah, I agree.
Well, I wouldn't have voted for
I
that.
agree that's a legitimate concern, but
Mhm.
what is your best gauge on that?
Right.
Who's voted on things before?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
That's the only thing that we can go off of.
It is, because I mean, who's had to actually vote on things before? Because is it easy to vote? Here's what I tell people. I mean, it's easy to go around saying I'm a conservative.
Mhm.
It's not hard to vote as a conservative, because when you're a conservative, you vote your principles.
Mhm.
But still, you get a lot of people looking at you when you vote as conservative, like, why? I can sit there and say that there have been times when Republicans have looked at me and said, why? For example, I mean, last month, we had green energy. Okay. I voted against green energy several years ago. Okay. But we've been using green energy for the last several years. So, I mean, it is what it is. You got to live with what you got. But, argument was, all right, we want green energy. Illinois is going green. That's what we need to do. Okay. Well, it was going to cost the taxpayers an extra $40,000. I pulled it off the consent agenda, and I wanted everybody to know I voted no. Okay. I'm not going to say which Republicans voted yes. I'm not going to get into that, but I'm just going to say that I voted no on it. Okay. If you want to go get green energy on your own, have at it. Okay. It doesn't bother me that you want green energy. You go get it yourself. Pay for it yourself. Okay. But what I do oppose is that the taxpayer should have to pay an extra $40,000 to do that. And that's what I voted against. I mean, so I voted against the $40,000 of extra green energy, or not the extra green energy, but so we could have green energy as opposed to regular energy.
Well,
And we got a certificate. You guys might want to know this, because the question always becomes, is that actually green energy they're selling us, or is it just something else? So they got a certificate that says it's green energy. So, because the big company said it's green energy.
Yeah, it's green energy.
All right, well, then it is. I mean, no more discussion about that.
You run into the whole problem of, your lithium battery car. Right? Your car will never be as green as my gasoline truck, because
Of how the lithium battery is created.
Yeah,
replacing it and everything like that.
The emissions, it'll never.
Building off of the question that Kat had, though, so how do we know that you're not going to go into office? And you speak to your record, and your record speaks for itself. But I think the biggest thing that I have a concern for, just with any candidate, is just the fact that we as conservatives in Illinois, and not even just Republicans, conservatives in Illinois, we are in more than a super minority in our state legislature, and the chances of us even getting a competitive minority in our state legislature are slim to none in 2024. So what kind of change do you hope to actually affect if elected to this after you announce, after your exploratory committee, it says that you can announce, and then and then what kind of change would you hope to actually have, considering the fact that, I mean, the chances of a conservative doing anything in our state legislature.
Maybe you
is
have
none.
more
first
pull
of all,
on the
the
McLean County Board.
exploratory committee won't tell me. I'll make the final decision, okay? Because there's a lot of decisions that go in. I mean, I do have a law practice I have to run too.
I know.
Okay?
I'm giving you a hard time.
Okay,
Chuck.
so
I'm just
I'll
giving you
make
a
the
hard time.
decision. I don't let anybody make decisions for me. But in regards to that, you know, you say there's a super minority of conservatives in Springfield. There's a super minority of conservatives on the county board. Okay, I mean, you know, it's not any different. You know, probably George Wendt and I are the two most conservative people on the county board. And if you doubt that, then I can provide you the article that a more liberal reporter indicated that I was more conservative. Okay, but yeah, I mean, what can you do? Well, I say, you know, one, I know everybody says this, but you know, you do have to focus to some extent on constituent services. And one of the examples that I gave was helping a small businessman or businesswoman get through the bureaucracy, because sometimes the bureaucracy just stands up to them. Okay. And you've got to get in there and stand up to them against some of these government bureaucrats. And you've got to say, no, they need to run this business. In regards to legislation, I mean, those are things that you can do that I have a proven record of doing. Another thing that you can do is, you know, you can have the ability to make bad legislation not so bad. Okay.
Yeah. Make sure you're using the microphone there.
Okay, not so bad.
This
Okay. And you also have the ability that, as I always say, you stand up to them when you can. You work with them when you can. You stand up to them when you must. Because there are times when you can get a more moderate conservative Democrat to say, yeah, you're right about that. We shouldn't be doing that. Let me talk to my colleagues about that and see if we can get some changes on that. Because I've done that on the county board too. You know, I mean, you have to be able to work across the aisle, but you can't surrender your principles in doing so. And I know that's the concern, that every time we send somebody to Springfield or Washington, D.C., they parade around with a flag saying, hey, I'm a conservative. I'm the conservative in the race. I'm the only conservative in the race. And I think sometimes Republicans or conservatives are too easily sweet talked to. Well, this person said they're conservative, so they must be. Well, that doesn't make you a conservative, okay? What makes you a conservative is when you actually go in there and vote like one, when you have Democrats looking at you, you have members of your own party looking at you, and you have the press looking at you, and they're all going to grill you because of the way you just voted. Okay?
And Reagan doesn't have that. That's the thing, is Reagan doesn't have that voting record.
No, she doesn't have the voting record, but I'm not gonna be negative against anybody. Right. I've met her. She's a nice person.
I've had her on. I'm gonna have her on again.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say anything bad about her. I mean, you know, I'm not gonna do that. I just think that my record is unmatched. It's proven conservative, principled conservative leadership and public service.
Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. We're talking with Chuck Erickson. He's the McLean County Board member, and Kevin Phares is joining me here on Conservative Cat Cities 92.9. And we have been talking about his run for Illinois State Representative.
Not Kevin's, just so everybody knows. Not Kevin's. Chuck Erickson's run.
Not Kevin Phares. But maybe you'll fill in for Tom Bennett. Tom Bennett is stepping out of his Senate seat, which was big news this week. So maybe, Kevin.
I'd have to take time off from the air to do that, and so that'd be a big ask for me. But I don't know. Maybe I'll form an exploratory committee.
There you go. There you go.
As much as I like Chuck, I want to stay far away from politicians. I'd rather just yell about them over the microphone and complain.
Well, sometimes they do need to be yelled at.
It's easy. It's hard to do. It's hard to do what Chuck Erickson does, is to go up there and vote your principles Speaking of which, we were talking about green energy a little bit. I did want to ask about the CO2 pipelines. There are a couple of big ones. I don't know if you've heard anything about this, but
Mhm.
they're taking carbon emissions from ethanol plants, right? Their carbon emissions, they're funneling it down into the ground with these two big pipelines. Now, from what I can see, the Wolf pipeline, and I think there's another one. I forget what it's called, but there's two big ones that
Mhm.
come from Iowa all the way into Illinois. From what I can see, it's going to skirt around McLean County. Is there anything that you could do as a McLean County board member to stop this from happening? Is there something that the McLean County board can kind of bring to vote? Or
It would depend, because the state legislature pretty much told us on wind farms, hey, you're going to have them. And we're going to tell you what it's going to be.
it's the
Okay.
same thing, yeah.
If the county government is a creature of the state government. So if the state government comes in and says, this is what you're going to do, there's not much we can say. Okay. Because we had some authority on wind farms until they recently passed that bill where hey, we'll tell you what the setbacks are going to be. We're going to tell you what things are going to happen and the way things are going to be done. Okay.
Hmm.
But on that, in regards to the CO2, one, I think it has to avoid the Muhammad aquifer. I mean, I think it has to go. It can't have anything around that. To me, that's a concern of mine. In addition, I was reading that they had an accident in Mississippi or something where they had the pipe broke.
Hmm.
Okay, and some people passed out because they didn't have enough oxygen. Nobody died, I guess, but I mean,
I
but it
know,
was
and
still.
somebody actually told
And
me.
they better make sure right now that they've got federal regulations that are going to make this thing right.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the first one of its kind, really,
Yeah.
coming to, because the one down in Mississippi was a little bit different. It was taking carbon that was already produced in the earth, and it was funneling
Yeah.
it, and it was like squeezing natural gas from a natural gas pipeline. So it was kind of like, it wasn't even like, but this is just solely for storage purposes. And, you can argue that, what if it bursts, and, all of these, like, oh my gosh, like, what if this happens? What if this happens? You can argue all of that. But here's my thing is, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to store carbon, like, at all. Right? Like, what are you doing? You're just storing it. Like, let's address the methane, right? There's all kinds of, I think, there like drills that are around Illinois. I think we're one of the top states that have these drilling machines that are out of commission, and they're like releasing methane into the air, or into the air, these emissions. But it's just like, carbon emissions happen. We breathe out carbon.
Right.
They're carbon
Well,
emissions.
Kat, your band's next.
Yeah, I just don't understand. And like, who benefits? Like, I don't understand who benefits from storing this the whole idea in of itself doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But I'm worried that it's going to come into my backyard, the Mahomet aquifer. I think there's even something that Bloomington, they have an aquifer. Um,
Normal is on I believe on the aquifer.
Normal.
Normal is Bloomington has its own water source, the lakes. But yes, that will be a concern. I mean, a few years ago, we talked about fracking in Illinois, and the the big thing that held it up was people were just upset about, hey, you can't put that over the aquifer. Because you can't have our drinking water
Contaminated.
contaminated.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I just wanted to bring that up and kind of ask you about it, because I was like, is that on your radar as a county board? And it kind of sounds like government has gotten so big in Illinois, where it's like, it
It
really.
was definitely talked about I believe, at a land use committee meeting. So it was a few months ago. But it's still being talked about. That's
Okay.
all I can say.
Now, are you concerned about you possibly leaving the McLean County Board and that doing more damage than you being in the Illinois General Assembly?
Well,
if you were
that's
to become an elected state rep.
it's nice to know that so many people love me on the McLean County Board. Okay, it is.
We're not saying
Well,
that.
they do. It's like, Chuck, you can't leave the McLean County Board. We need you there. You have to stay. Okay, I mean, it has to be you. You know, you're the one who stands up for law and order. You're the one who stands up for no taxes. You know, you're the one that a lot of Republicans look to before they vote. You're the one who leads on a lot of conservative issues. I mean, that is one of the biggest objections I have had about running is like, Chuck, we just can't afford to lose you. Which is nice to know.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, I didn't, I mean,
Well, it is. I mean, let's
I didn't know so many people loved me. You know, it's just nice to be loved.
Look at that. He's beaming with pride, folks, here on Conservative Cat Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. Well, it is a 10-10 split, isn't it, on the county board?
It is. It is.
And I mean, and so how would that kind of work out logistically with you?
Well, I have
So
the 2
say
years.
you win or you lose.
Well,
If you
it wouldn't
lose,
make any difference. If I ran for it, I couldn't run for the county board, and I've got the 2-year seat. So I would be, I'll be either be going to the state legislature or moving off the county board. I mean, at the end of 2024, that's next year. Why?
I know.
Joe Biden moment. I can't even remember what the next year is. But I'll have to call the fax line.
Call the fax line.
No, here's how you frame it for your campaign. You are so stuck in what you're doing right now that you can't even think that far ahead because you want to focus on everybody right now.
I do. That's exactly what it is. But I pride myself in being authentic. I mean, basically, you get what you see out of me. And if I tell you this is who I am, that's what you get. Whether you like it or not. I mean, that's
what is that? Maya Angelou said, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, I mean, what would likely happen then is if when I don't run, if I decide to run for the state rep position, which I'm leaning in favor of doing, then Ross Webb would likely run for my seat. Okay, so, and
good choice.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to encourage people to vote for me if I run for the state legislature, but I suppose if I really, really, really felt I had to go back to the county board and I was unsuccessful in running for the state legislature, I could run for it again in 2 years.
So that would be 2026.
2026, against Mr. Bernie.
Oh. Oh. That's what I'm worried about. What if Corey gets somebody, because it's you and him. And if he gets another Democrat in there, right, then it's
well, it'll be up to Ross to stop that.
That's a lot. That's a lot of pressure for Ross there.
I know.
No, but yeah, I was just interested how that would play out, kind of logistically.
Yeah,
so either way,
I can't
win or
say
lose,
I can't say what's going to happen in the other districts. I mean, it's a 10-10 split. We've got to hold some other seats, and we got to try to win a few. Okay. And, the Democrats, I wish people everybody should serve in local government. Just let me say that. Okay. I mean, people are like, if I can't serve as state rep or if I can't be a congressman, I don't want to do anything. Well, that's not the way you should think. Okay. I mean, school boards need you, city councils need you, and county boards need you. Okay. And so, if you can run for the county board, you should. And the Democrats in this county are motivated, and they work hard to win their seats. And the Republicans have got to match that because, I've said this 1,000 times on the radio here. McLean County isn't just red anymore; it's purple. Okay, and if you go out in the county, it's red. If you come into Bloomington Normal, it's purple. Some parts are blue. I mean, and so I mean. And we have to fight for this county. I mean, we love it. We love the state of Illinois. It's our home. We have to continue to fight for it till we can stop fighting anymore. You know?
One thing that I wanted to talk about before we move on from before we move on to a state issue, specifically the IDES and some possible fraud that's going on there with COVID-19. You were one of the pivotal county board members who said, you know what, we're opening up the county. Before we get into all of that, one thing that I did want to touch on briefly, I have gotten several messages from listeners and from people talking about this taxation that happened with the Central Illinois Regional Airport. They expanded the tax base, right, to include these rural communities. Speaking of the purple McLean County, to include places like Lexington, blah, blah, blah. So now people are paying taxes that went before the county board. Nothing really came of it. You guys didn't vote on it. You guys tabled it, and it wound up passing. Thank you, Mr. Bowtie Senator Dave Kaler.
It passed in Springfield. The McLean County Board had a resolution before it in April to pass a resolution to tell Springfield not to do this. Okay. It was introduced by Jim Soldner. He had the support, I believe. I don't think I'm wrong here, but the Bloomington mayor, not the Bloomington, but the McLean County Mayor's Association. And he brought it, and Catherine Metzger voted to introduce it. I seconded the motion. Okay, so it got introduced. Immediately, it got a motion to table.
From who again? Do you know?
It was Member Schaefer. And Member Schaefer voted to table it, and she got a second. So then we had a vote on tabling the motion until after basically the state legislature spoke on the subject. Okay. I voted against the motion to table, and I would have voted for the resolution. But I was not successful in getting it to the floor. My view of it is that one, if it's such a great idea, whether I like it or not, okay, McLean County does from time to time vote for tax increases. Okay. They do. Okay. I mean, if you can convince the voters, and I didn't understand why the referendum process was such a bad idea. And, basically we took the decision out of the referendum process and put it into the hands of, elected officials who always want more money.
Yes.
I mean, you'll never give them enough money.
They always
want more money. I mean, you can never feed them enough.
Yeah. Well, that was the whole premise of Dave Kaler's bill was, hey, we're not going to let this go to referendum and the people aren't going to vote on it. Instead, we're just going to do it.
Yeah. And why? Yeah. Why, if it's such a great idea, why not take it to the people?
Yeah.
I mean,
because then they would actually have to advocate for it and get the support behind it. And there is no support because the rural communities don't use the flippin' airport because Bloomington Normal uses the airport. That's why it's called the Bloomington Normal Airport. The execs here from State Farm, Rivian, they use it. Okay, go to the airport in the middle of the day on a weekday and you will find out who uses that airport and interview them, right? And that's not to say that the rural community doesn't, but come on, let's be real here. Do they really use it enough to justify them paying
more for it? Yeah.
Yeah. And they didn't bother to ask any of those questions or get to the bottom of that answer or try to get an answer. How many people outside of Bloomington Normal actually use the airport? That would have been something that they could have collected very easily, done some sort of poll.
They could have looked at ticket sales and stuff.
Well, the rural community too was concerned that, listen, if you're going to come out and tax us more, okay, that's less money we have to do things we need. Okay. I mean, that we need to do. And so, I mean, you can only,
well, the reason why I brought it up was because there's been talk about this access via the East Side Bypass Interstate. And there's talks about that possibility of the airport taxation money going to fund that project. Now, I talked with you about it. I have not heard anything to suggest that project is happening and that they are using those funds from the airport taxation to fund that effort, the bypass. I haven't heard anything. I was just curious some history being that I'm from, not Bloomington Normal, not McLean County, and I haven't really heard about this East Side project. It's a bypass, I guess, interstate.
Yeah, it was a highway proposed. I don't know the exact time frame, but it was back around maybe 2012, 2014, in that time frame. I could be off a year or two, one way or the other.
Mhm.
So please don't fact check me on that. It might be, I might be off a year or two.
Mhm.
But the issue was they wanted a bypass that went from I-74 on the east side of town and ran it up to I-55, so they wouldn't have to go around town to get to 74. Okay,
Mhm.
they could just take a highway from 74 over to 55. Does that make sense? What I'm saying?
Yep.
I mean, they wouldn't have to drive around
Mhm.
the county, and so but the county board moved not 1 inch after 2014. I mean, it's been, I can't even remember the last time we had a discussion about anything about the East Side Highway. Okay, because we don't talk about funding it. And if the East Side Highway were ever to pass, I mean, I don't even know that Airport Taxation Authority, although I'd have to check this, could even pay for it, because it's going to be expensive, and it's going to have to be a state and federal project too.
Mhm.
McLean County has to secure the land for it to be done, but getting everybody to pay for it is a whole nother issue.
Mhm.
And so I will have to check on that, but I thought the issue was pretty much gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah. And I have no idea how in the world of Bloomington Normal Taxation Authority, the airport,
yeah,
the taxation authority is going to be able to alone pay for a highway.
right.
I don't know. I haven't looked at it. I have no
It's
idea.
going to be take state and federal money too. There's just no way it gets done. I
Mhm.
mean, you got to get.
Well, let me ask you this, Mr. State Representative. So, Mr. State Representative. So, do you think that the possibility of this taxation money, so say that the taxation authority has this grand master plan to use those monies to build that East Side bypass, is that going to be some sort of stepping stone or justification for the state of Illinois, or for the feds to fund this project even more? So here's the Bloomington Normal Airport Authority. They're like, hey, look at all this money we got. We got all of this money.
You would. I mean, you'd have to show the feds and everybody else that, hey, the county's in support, the local communities in support. It's crazy to get, well, it's not crazy, I guess, but I mean, to build anything, you got to have environmental studies and studies about this and studies about that and studies about this and studies about that. So, I mean, I don't see that even getting majority support on the county board right now. I just don't see it.
Interesting. 30 Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. Okay, we've got about a few minutes left. I did want to give Kevin the reins. You have any questions for Chuck Erickson?
No, I've been putting in mine. I mean, the thing is I think that Chuck is, I've known Chuck for quite a while now. And I'm very interested. I really need to know more about the potential opponent in this race. And so I think that Chuck seems to have a good head on his shoulders, and he seems to have his voting record speaks for itself. I got to look into this race a little bit more, and I recommend everybody do that because that's the best thing we can do as voters in this area.
Mm-hmm.
But Kat, you know more about the local issues than I do. I focus a lot more on the state and national. So.
Yeah, well, one thing about the state that I wanted to hit with you, Chuck, is the IDS and the fraud and all of this, the corruption in Illinois. Now, that's a big ticket item. What's your big ticket item going into the Illinois General Assembly? What's one thing that you are just, because you'll see that a lot of time in candidates. Dennis Tipsworth at the time ran on Law and Order. It's kind of funny because, but it's kind of funny because he voted yes for the non-citizens to arrest citizens. I will not let him live that down. But there's
It's getting hot in here, Kat.
It's true. Well, and then you also have just state reps run for certain things. Reagan, it seems like she's running a lot on family, on the social issue. If I had to put a pin in it, I don't know. I'm gonna have Reagan on. I've had her on a few times.
Fair time.
It seems like she is more towards the family issue of the schools. She said we talked a lot about that, about the schools, and how Governor J.B. Pritzker has made it a point to essentially charge people for not having pornography on their shelves. He's going to charge you some sort of fine if you're a public library who decides that Flamer isn't appropriate in the kids section, right? So that's what's going on as far as the cultural issue. But your ticket, one big ticket item.
Well, I think you have to look at the district, okay? And the district is primarily made up of rural communities, okay? It doesn't really take in much of Bloomington. It takes in some of Bloomington. Doesn't really take in much of Decatur. So if you really look at the district, it's just small rural communities, and they deserve a voice in Springfield. I mean, they deserve a voice. I think I can be that voice because I was born and raised in a small rural community. Now, that rural community is not in the district, but I was born and raised in Gibson City, Illinois, and I love Gibson City, Illinois. And
Me too.
3,400 people in Harvest Moon Theater, and I can relate to rural communities. I mean, that's something I understand, but I'm also strong on law and order. Okay, I mean, I would have the support of Matt Lane. I would have the support of former Sheriff John Sandage. They know my record on law and order. They know my record of supporting them at the local level. When I ran for election in 2022, I had the support of John Sandage. I had the support of the Fraternal Order of Police of the McLean County Sheriff's Department. And they know that, hey, this demonization of cops and it's having a real effect. I mean, it is. It's harder to hire people to do those jobs. That means you got to pay them more money, which means the taxpayers have got to continually pay more. We have a shortage of prosecutors down there now that we're losing. And it's weird because the counties are competing against each other for the limited pool that there is. Okay. And so, some people might be deterred from being a prosecutor for the sole reason is, well, I don't know, I want justice. Well, I mean, justice takes place when you have a good prosecutor and a good criminal defense attorney. The good criminal defense attorney makes sure the prosecutor prosecutes on good evidence. Okay.
There's a yin and a yang.
Yeah, I mean, you make sure there's good evidence.
They have the burden of proof. So.
You keep the prosecutors honest. Okay. I mean, because otherwise you'd have runaway prosecutors. On the other hand, you need prosecutors to prosecute criminals and not to just let them go.
Huh.
And so
with the ending of the Safety Act, I think you're right that this is something that's very touchy.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, Chuck Erickson's just going to tell everybody, try that in a small town, right?
Yeah, try that in a small town.
Try that in a small town. It's true. Well, and that's the thing. But also the issue with the public libraries, the schools, and we saw what happened in Hayworth, Illinois, which I believe is in your district.
Well, it would be, yes. I mean, yeah, and that's crazy to have that type of material in a school.
Yeah,
It's
you
just
had 100
crazy.
parents show up, and it's like you tried that stuff in a small town, like not even the crime, but you try it in a small town.
It's just sad that we're to a point that where it's like, we really have to debate this. I mean, well, we need to have them. No, they don't need to see that. I mean,
Yeah. Well, and the Safety Act, the crime, it's going to be a big thing for people on the ballot in 2024. We're getting close to the end of the break. One thing I did want to ask about the Safety Act, Chuck Erickson, was I don't quite understand the whole ending cash bail thing. So that's supposed to happen in a couple of months. Do you understand? And your expertise is in attorney, and I know you don't deal with crime. You're not a criminal attorney.
I don't do criminal defense.
But
and I don't do crime.
Ending cash bail. I don't understand if it was like such a if it was so constitutional and if it's like so pressing that we have to end cash bail now, why not end it now and 2 months from now? Do you know why that is?
To get the courts prepared for it. They got to get the system in place, because I can tell you down there, they were working for they had a working committee of judges and state's attorneys and public defenders trying to figure out how are we going to work through this Safety Act and how are we going to implement this in our system, you know?
Mhm.
And so that's what it's for, is basically to give local prosecution and local prosecutors and local courts and public defenders time to figure out how are they going to implement that in their particular county.
Mhm.
That's what it's for, because they just know if they just said do it tomorrow, half of them would not be in compliance. My guess that half of them will probably not be in compliance by the end of September. McLean County probably will be, because we have the resources to put all that together. But the smaller counties probably would not, because they may have a little bit more difficulty putting all that together. It's just going to, because you got to make sure you get the judicial schedules right. You've got these detention hearings. You got to make sure you get them right. You got to hold them at the right times. I don't know all the details of that, but you've got to get it all right. And, sometimes the counties lag in catching up to what the state tells them to do, because the state always tells you to do something. It just doesn't give you any resources to do it with. For example, they have said that everybody has to file electronically, which is good. I mean, that's the modern era, but some local counties don't have the resources to do electronic filing, because all attorneys now generally file electronically.
Mhm.
We do that in McLean County.
Yeah.
You're just working
And
through
we
it,
have
because
that
the Supreme
database.
Court, while this was a state law, that was a Supreme Court mandate that just basically said, listen, you gotta move towards electronic filing. And some of the smaller counties are saying, well, yeah, we'll do it when you give us some money.
When you
I
give us
mean,
the money, yeah, sure,
I mean,
why not? Yeah, well,
we're happy to do it. The court will probably come in and eventually say, well, you'll figure out a way to pay for it.
and that's one thing I want to,
Yeah.
like, I know that you say that you have to follow the state in a sense, but what if you didn't? Like, what would happen? Like, are they gonna just like come in and like cuff you, or like what would happen if you just said,
You'd have
you
a
know what?
constitutional crisis, okay? I mean, because if a particular county decided that it wasn't going to follow the Safety Act, I'm not aware if the Attorney General can go in there and do something about that. There might be something in the law that says if a certain county isn't doing it, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. So you'd have to look at that. I don't know off the top of my head. Courts will order the trial court to, hey, comply with the Safety Act. You're not doing it. Generally
To
trial
see
courts
you
will comply.
in cuffs, that would be pretty fun.
No, I don't want to be in cuffs.
He said earlier he doesn't commit crimes. So.
I don't want to follow the Safety Act, and then you're in cuffs and they're dragging you out. I would not. It feels very police state-esque. I'm just going to say that about the Safety Act. I think it's wrong. It's unconstitutional to mandate counties to do this to end cash bail. You have to have something there to keep the criminals in.
Well, they do have this detention hearing scheme, but what the concern is, that's not going to be enough.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not going to cut it. Mm-hmm. And so, ultimately we'll see what happens with that. But on the Safety Act, just remember that the trial court judge basically said, no, you can't implement this no cash bail thing. It violates the Constitution. Then it went up to appeal with the Illinois Supreme Court, and then 5 judges decided, well, no, you can. 2 judges dissented. So, if you took the legal position that you'd still be in the minority, but if you took the legal position that this is wrong, you're not legally taking a bad position. I mean, there are judges and prosecutors have taken the position, and it's a solid legal position that, hey, this does violate the Illinois Constitution. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, when the Illinois Supreme Court speaks 5-2, the highest court says, well, no, here's what it is, and there's what you're going to do.
Nothing we can
do. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us here on Conservative Cat Cities 92.9. Thank you, Chuck Erickson. And
thank you
good luck
for having me
with your announcement.